I'm on Capitol tonight. Occupy Wall Street and its spin-offs are still going quite strong around the nation, but it is going to take more than just marches to get the movement's goals accomplished, to the extent that these folks actually have any, that is. The protesters are a very loosely knit bunch of people, and they don't have a hard and fast list of demands, generally speaking. However, they do want to see more people held accountable for the economic collapse in this country, and they'd also like to see changes to the tax rates so the wealthiest Americans are paying more, their, quote, fair share. And the so-called 99%ers are looking for ways to move forward. As that happens, my next guests say that they are offering some suggestions. Senator Dan Squadron and Assemblyman Rory Lancman are joining me from New York City this evening. Gentlemen, it is good to see both of you.
Good to be here.
Hi.
So you guys wrote an op-ed. It appeared in the Daily News and perhaps actually elsewhere. But you're trying to give some definition to this and some goals to push it forward that could be realized, and then maybe see an end to this, because at this point there is no real end in sight. Is that right, Senator? You want to start us off?
Look, there's no question that the protesters have tapped a vein of frustration. And you talked about a couple of the issues. I would also argue that corporate influence in the political process is at the root of it. And look, are those going to get solved with one bill or two bills or three bills or five? No. But I actually do think that it's our role and our responsibility as legislators, and probably, frankly, as the media as well, to acknowledge the complaints and the concerns and try to find what are the legislative solutions that start to answer them. We've proposed three. Around corporate role in politics, around the fair share tax on those who make more than $1 million a year, and on giving the state a better ability to crack down on Wall Street abuses.
Yeah, Assemblyman, let's start with that first, well, that second one actually, which would be fair shares is what the Senator is calling it, millionaire's tax. It's more commonly known as. The governor is inclined to let that increase, that personal income tax increase that we saw enacted 3 years ago, expire on schedule at the end of December. Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver says he's very much in favor of pushing it. He's your leader, but he's not going to hold up the budget to do it. Do you agree with that?
I do agree that we need to be responsible, and one cannot just take the view that if they don't get what they want out of the budget process, they're going to hold up the entire budget. I mean, that's one of the frustrations that people had with Washington, continue to have with Washington, the Republicans in the House in particular, saying if they don't get what they want on whether it's the extending the debt limit or you name it, they're just going to shut down government. So New Yorkers can count on the fact that the Assembly, the Senate, and the governor are going to act responsibly. We're going to advocate for the views that are important to us and to the people that we represent. But at the end of the day, we have to arrive at a result, and that's what New Yorkers expect. And in that same vein, I guess that's what Dan and I are trying to do with the Occupy Wall Street protest. I'm not sure that it's always the job of protesters to articulate precise policy points or legislative agendas in their protests. They're expressing, in many ways, a point of view that many of the people that I represent share regarding accountability on Wall Street, regarding the tremendous inequality in incomes and in terms of who has to pay to get our city and our state and our country back in fiscal health, and the extraordinary corporate influence in politics. And it's our job as legislators to come up with policy prescriptions that meet those demands and those issues, and that's what we're trying to do with this legislation. And in terms of the millionaire's tax, making sure that all New Yorkers contribute to getting our state's fiscal house in order is something that's very, very important.
There's another piece of legislation here in the trio that you've proposed. Senator, this is directly quoting from your op-ed. It would unleash the power of the Martin Act by allowing public and union pension funds to bring their own lawsuits without waiting for the Attorney General. Now, that sounds fantastic, except that I think that we have a rather litigious society. You would probably agree. It sounds a little bit dangerous, perhaps, to me.
Well, look, civil redress is in the Constitution, so we could have a broader conversation about the right to bring civil actions.
We could indeed.
This is actually a piece. This is a piece of legislation that the Assemblyman has really taken a lead on, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think the Martin Act, we've seen how effectively it's been used by three successful attorney generals in a row, having the ability for some of these funds to also unleash it, I think would be significant. But I'd let the Assemblyman speak to that one.
Well, the only thing that I would add is that the ability of individuals who have been defrauded and cheated to bring lawsuits to recover their losses from those who have stolen them or looted them or negligently lost them is an important part of accountability in our system. And as federal courts and as Congress have made it harder and harder for ordinary investors to bring those kinds of lawsuits, you see that as one of the things that the protesters have been talking about, which really resonates with people, no one on Wall Street has been really held accountable for the mess that they got us into. And letting pension funds and union pension funds and public pension funds bring those kinds of lawsuits will enable them to recover the hundreds of millions of dollars that they've lost, but also air those issues and air that kind of conduct and bring the kind of accountability that we haven't seen yet.
Are you not worried, though, that, I mean, when you talk about accountability and lawsuits, it just sounds like an enormously time-consuming and potentially expensive way to try and get some redress. I think that a lot of people also agree with you that banks got bailed out and that no one went to jail. I mean, we've heard these refrains from a while, but it seems awfully time-consuming and potentially not the fastest way to get relief.
It would be time-consuming and expensive for the pension funds to bring those kinds of suits. And that is a check to make sure that those suits are not brought frivolously. But where the New York State Pension Fund, New York City Pension Fund, or some union pension fund in upstate was wiped out by fraud or malfeasance, and they believe that it's worth the time and the effort and the resources to bring a claim to recover their losses, they ought to be able to do so at no expense to the taxpayers, at no impact on the operations of the Attorney General's office. This is what, as Dan alluded to, we understand in our Constitution gives people the right to go to court and to seek redress for their grievances. The alternative, if you do not provide people with a system, a political system or a legal system to redress grievances and right wrongs, is potentially protests on the street that really nobody really wants to see as being, as you put it, the final result.
So the piece 3 here that you're proposing is some disclosure. It has to do with political contributions, and the disclosure not just about money expended for candidates or causes by corporations, is that right? But also the purpose of the corporation behind the expenditure, whatever it is that's motivating that money. I think that, and I'm not sure, Senator, is this one that you'd like to tackle? Why not just try and more significantly limit campaign contributions in general by corporations? They are limited already.
Well, unfortunately, the Supreme Court a couple of years ago, the Citizens United decision, just blasted a hole in the ability to regulate corporate expenditures. And in fact, in that decision, which I think was mistaken in a number of ways, it basically said, look, the states and others can come up with solutions to the decision that we're making. And so this bill, which we carry, would do that. Look, corporate expenditures in the corporate place and the political process is a bigger conversation. There's no question that corporate expenditures shouldn't be just an attempt for a small number of executives to grind their own political axe. And this is very simple. If there are corporate political expenditures that make sense, let the shareholders approve them. And at the end of the year, justify them around your business purpose. I do think that one of the things you're seeing on the street is this idea that the formal political process is no longer responsive enough to regular individuals and is too in the thrall of corporate interests. One of the problems with that is corporate money in politics. This Supreme Court decision is a limit on our ability to regulate it. So we say, great. Corporations are made up of shareholders. Let the shareholders decide and justify the decisions to them at the end of the year. Yeah,
well, the idea there is to bring people back into the equation, I think, is what you're talking about. Unfortunately, we're almost out of time. I want to thank you, Senator Squadron, Assemblyman Lancman. I think that the point here is to try and find some kind of finality so this doesn't become an endless protest with no end, because I'm not necessarily certain that that is going to get anything accomplished for anyone, particularly, and this goes for you, Senator, if you just want to have a quick quick last word. You've got some constituents down there who are not participating and are perhaps being inconvenienced.
Well, look, in fairness, because of these protests, we're talking about these issues tonight, which
Correct.
is a good thing.
Yep.
Separately, the protesters can't forget that Wall Street is adjacent to a growing and thriving residential community, and there are real quality of life concerns that have to be addressed and have to be dealt with.
Well, Senator Assemblyman, I thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be seeing you soon, most likely in Albany, and until then, be well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.